My name is Mark Forrester. I am the University Chaplain, Director of Religious Life here at Vanderbilt University, and this is our first ever Chaplain's Speaker Series kickoff. This was an event that was endowed through former Chancellor Harvey Branscombe. When he died, he left an endowment for Benton Chapel for the support, as it is said, quote, of non-sectarian religious services at Benton Chapel and for religious and ceremonial festivities that we can celebrate from year to year from this most generous gift. I would like to thank a few people before I introduce our choir for tonight. First of all, Provost Richard McCarty, who gave us the go-ahead in conceiving this series, and is a very big supporter. Could not be here tonight, but we certainly do appreciate the support that has come from him and those in Kirkland Hall. I would like to thank the Office of the Dean of Students, in particular our Dean of Students, Mark Bandis, and Associate Dean, Pat Helen, Vanderbilt Divinity School, and the Cal Turner Program for Moral Leadership in the Professions, which earlier today at West End United Methodist Church sponsored an area clergy conversation with our speaker, Rob Bell. I'd like to thank all of you, area churches, ministerial associations, alumni associations, the community at large. I am just new into this position, but as of 2 and 3 weeks ago, we were getting calls every day from people around the Southeast inquiring about this event. So from wherever you came, we thank you. Last, I would like to thank our program director, Mike Zimmerman, our graduate assistant, Jay Bosman, and members of our Interfaith Council who have done so much of just the groundwork that has helped make this happen. I really feel like I need to give an extra shout out to Mike Zimmerman, who is the king of logistics, and he is the man behind the curtain who has helped make things happen time and time again. Now I'd like to introduce Victory A Cappella, who will have 2 selections for us, and then we will get to the main event. Again, thank you for being here.
non nobis Domine tuo da gloriam, 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 non nobis Domine, non nobis Domine, non nobis Domine, non nobis Domine, non nobis Domine tuo da gloriam, 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 non nobis Domine, non nobis Domine, non nobis Domine, non nobis Domine tuo da gloriam. Sed nomini tuo da gloriam,
Sed nomini tuo da gloriam,
sed nomini tuo da gloriam, sed nomini tuo da gloriam, non nobis Domine 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 tuo da gloriam, non nobis Domine, non nobis Domine, non nobis Domine, non nobis Domine, Domine, tuo da gloriam.
If you'll pardon me for just two more housekeeping matters, and I'll get with our introduction. One is that we will have question and answer after our speaker has concluded his talk for tonight, and these microphones, these cordless mics, will be floating around the house. So I ask you to stand up, clearly indicate that you'd like to pose a question, and make sure that it is a question and not a narrative or a dissertation. Secondly, we're going to have a book signing and some refreshments if you just make it through the nave here to the back, through the center door, down the hall to the left. It'll be about the third door on your left. So we invite you for a book signing at that time when we've concluded. As I prayed and contemplated who our first speaker for this Chaplain Speakers Series should be, there were many individuals who came to mind, but for some reason, Rob Bell kept coming more to mind for some strange reason. Maybe it's just good timing in that we had heard that a new book was on the horizon. Possibly it's because at a university such as this that there are many different expressions of religion and theology and spirituality at play. And we do have a fairly strong Christian presence here, but also very much interfaith and growing in beautiful ways as we learn to appreciate the different kind of traditions that are lived in our midst in this community. And I thought back to the very first time that I had actually read and learned about Rob Bell. It had to have been at least 6 or 7 years ago when Jennifer Faust, our, at that time, Presbyterian campus minister, told me about Velvet Elvis. And I think that was one of the first books that Rob Bell had published. And I read it, and it really was indeed a repainting of the Christian faith. There have been several other books that he has written. The one that really has, in some respects, catapulted him into national notoriety was Love Wins, a book about heaven, hell, and the fate of every person who ever lived. And again, as I sort of sifted the contents of that book through my thinking, a lot of it was not new, but it was said in a very new way to obviously a very new national audience. And it is inspiring still a lot of talk and a lot of controversy in the best of possible ways. I also think, when I think of Rob Bell as a pastor, certainly a great preacher, and an artist with all the work that he has done with these Pneuma spiritual films. He has really learned the art of mass communication and is able to articulate the gospel message in image and in new, fresh ideas that still tell the old story. And so it was settled. Rob would come to be with us, and we can't be more delighted to have him here tonight. At the very beginning of a national book tour, the book is entitled What We Talk About When We Talk About God. And so at this time, Rob, we want to hear you talk to us about what you talk about when you talk about God.
Thank you. Appreciate it. All right. What's going on? How you doing? How far can I walk into the crowd before that thing starts making that high-pitched sound that makes me have to put my lightsaber away? Oh, I can come this far. Excellent. Now, where are you? Who are you people? Where are you from? You from here, Nashville?
Indiana.
Birmingham?
Alabama.
Birmingham, Alabama?
Kentucky.
Kentucky? Knoxville? Florida. You didn't come to Florida just for this. You did? All right. That's really inspiring or kind of stalkerish. I'm not sure. So maybe we'll talk about that a little bit. All right. Wow. All right. Well, it's great to be with you. My name is Rob, and I live in California, which is to the left. And I met my wife freshman year, first or second week of school on a tennis court in college. We were both 18. Just saying. And we've been married for 18 years, and it's just amazing. And I have a 14-year-old son who is a rapper. And I have a 12-year-old son who is a skater. And then I have a 3-year-old daughter who is a princess. I actually think she's a princess. Like, there's some sort of developmental stage where you haven't yet got irony. So you're like, no, seriously, I'm a princess. And you just sort of, excellent, whatever you'd like. And so I write books and make films and come to Nashville. And it's the third thing I do with my life. I visit Nashville. And in that order. And I have a new book out called What We Talk About When We Talk About God. A couple of years ago, my 5th book was called Love Wins, and that came out this week in a version for like junior high and high school students, because we got to shape them early. And then my friend Carlton, he wrote and produced a show called Lost. Are there any Lost fans? And he and I are developing a show, and it's really amazing. It's coming along, and hopefully in the next little while you'll get to see what we've been cooking on. But if you sort of take Lost and you take some of the work I've done with sermons and books and films and live events and Q&A, and you put it all in a blender and threw in a little, maybe some TED Talks, some Peter Rollins, maybe some Letterman, and some Colbert, and you put it in a blender, hopefully you'd come out with a thing that we're working on, and we're really, really excited about it. And then most importantly, I try to surf every day, and I have not surfed today because I've been in Nashville. So if I start twitching partway through the talk, it's because my gills are drying up. So that's a bit about me, and then there's you. And so I'd like to talk a bit to you about God, and we'll see where that takes us. And I kind of know where we're headed, and I kind of don't, and that's when it gets interesting. You know what I mean? And then maybe we'll take some time for questions at the end, and then we'll see where that takes us. When my wife was 15, she went on her first date. Guy came to her house, picked her up, took her to a movie, and then took her home. They're driving home, and she lived in the desert up in the foothills, and the roads out there, it's way above Scottsdale, Arizona, are these long, straight desert roads. And she and her date are coming home, and a drunk driver coming the other way, somewhere between 50 and 60 miles an hour, crossed over and hit them head on. Absolutely demolished the car she was riding on. The drunk driver then spun around and hit another car, and everybody had to be rushed to the hospital. My wife's parents get a call that their daughter has just been head on by a drunk driver going between 50 and 60 miles an hour, and they need to get to the hospital. And so they jump in the car and they take off. They're driving as fast as they can to the hospital down one of these long, straight desert roads, and they realize there's a commotion up ahead in the road. They realize as they get closer that they are coming upon the spot where the accident was, and they have not yet removed the car their daughter was riding in from the road. And so they have to drive right by the car that their daughter had been riding in moments earlier when she was hit head-on by a drunk driver. My mother-in-law, Judy, says that as Kristen's dad, Doug, drove by, for the first time Judy had ever seen, Doug had tears pouring down his cheeks. Now, you have to understand my father-in-law. My father-in-law is just, how many people in their late 60s do you know lift every day and have a six-pack? One of these six-packs, not like these dude six-packs. He runs every morning at like 5 a.m. He's just like built like a tank. He's totally bald, like shiny seer reflection bald, and for years he had a large red mustache with no irony. And he's kind of like a cross between Mr. Clean and G. Gordon Liddy. The most terrified I ever have been was asking him for his daughter's hand in marriage, because I was like, man, this could go south on me fast. Stay strong, man, stay strong. And as he drives by this car that his only daughter was riding in moments early, my mother-in-law says for the first time, there's tears streaming down his face. There is this sacred, holy value to life. The things that weigh the most can't be weighed. Are you with me? There is this gift. If you're breathing, which includes most of us here, just pushing you to see. Like, is that a joke? If you're breathing, you are, at the most profound, basic level of existence, a recipient of a gift. We all share that. Race, creed, lifestyle, perspective. We all have this gift of breath, life. Interestingly enough, in pretty much every ancient religion, the word for breath and the word for spirit are the same word. The ancient Hebrews had this word kavod. Originally, kavod was a business term. Kavod referred to how something actually weighs. And so when you were doing business transactions and you were using scales, the actual weight of something was really crucial for fairness and all that sort of thing. But over time, the word kavod came to not just mean the literal weight of something, it came to refer to the figurative weight, the sense of something having depth or significance, the sense that it weighs something at some level way beyond just flesh and skin and bone. We are all recipients of this profound, fragile, precious, sacred, holy gift we call life. Now, I started out, I've been a pastor for a number of years, and one of the things you do as a pastor is people bring you their babies because they want to show you their new babies, and you learn how to say, wow, that's a really cute baby. And if it's not, you learn to say things like, wow, only you could have had that child. Or, wow, I totally know whose baby this is. Parentheses, your baby is funny looking. But we were all kind of funny looking. So, but what I realized over time is that whenever I would see the baby, I would always say some line, because you never just go, oh, wow, you got a baby. Right? Oh, look, more human population. No, you say something like, oh, and then what do you do? I always found myself instinctually, I would look for the hand, and then I would always, you like grab the hand and those little fingers, and you hold it up and you go, oh, it's so small, right? Like you're surprised that it's small. Like you don't hold it up, but it's like this giant, yeah. And you, time. You marvel every time at the smallness of that hand. Every time. And I realized doing this year after year after year, I'm not just marveling at the smallness of the baby's hand. New life is profoundly moving and mysterious because all of life is profoundly moving and mysterious. And so when you notice the baby's hand and you're making conversation about this, oh my word, this baby, you are at the same time reflecting upon new life is moving because your own life is a profound mystery and you are deeply connected with this new life. We have this intuitive sense, whether you're religious or not, or whether you believe, whatever, we have this sense that life matters, that we are connected with each other in some profound ways. The Sandy Hook school shooting a couple of months ago, how many of you had this profound sense that that shooting had something to do with you and us? That it somehow doesn't exist isolated, that we are at some profound level all connected. Last year I went to the TED conference in Long Beach. Anybody watch TED Talks from time to time? And TED Talk, by the way, TED is fascinating when you're there because you're sitting there and you're like, dude, that guy looks just like Peter Gabriel. Because it is. All right. And at one point they asked the people, how many of you are religious? And a friend of mine guessed 2% of the people raised their hand and said they were religious. See, they're the smart people. And yet, that's a whole other talk, by the way. And yet, during one of the day's talks, and you hear talk after talk after talk, this brilliant lawyer named Brian Stevenson got up. And he works in the court system to bring justice to those who don't have proper representation. And he talked about what it's like to represent young men who have had no father and no sort of community structure. And he talked about the injustice they receive at the hands of the courts and his work to make sure that they were treated fairly. And it was an absolutely unbelievably inspiring talk. And at the end of the talk, he quoted at the end Martin Luther King, who was quoting someone else, and he said, the moral arc of the universe is long and it bends towards justice. And it was just a moment like, and then the crowd gave him a standing ovation, and the next day all the people who attended TED pitched in to give his organization $1 million. The moral arc of the universe is long and it bends towards justice. So a room full of people who 2 to 3% of them say they are religious, when somebody talks to them about the moral arc of the universe, give him a standing ovation. Something within them says, this thing is headed somewhere. Correct? It's like we are hardwired to believe that this isn't the whole show, that lights aren't turned off and it's over, that somehow this is going somewhere. There is an arc, there is a trajectory. We have this intuitive sense that life matters. If you've ever tried to talk somebody out of suicide, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Because you're talking to them and you keep saying things like, no, it matters. And you're looking for like really technical, articulate, fresh ways of saying it, but you end up saying, no, it matters. And you're trying to find language for it, but you're begging and pleading with them because you have some sense, very hard to articulate, that they should not take their life because at some level beyond words, it matters. We are all connected, and it's heading somewhere. Jane Fonda was asked, and when you're going to write a book about God, always quote Jane Fonda, because that just takes the whole thing to a whole new place. Jane Fonda was asked why she became a Christian. And she said, I became a Christian because I could feel reverence humming in me. I could feel reverence humming in me. And I would present to you that I believe we're at a key moment in sort of culture and where we all are at, that we have a large number of us who have this sense of reverence humming within us. We hear a piece of music. We hold a baby. We have a meal with friends. We're out somewhere hiking or by a lake or catching a wave. Come on now. And we're overwhelmed with this sense of this reverence humming within us. And so there are very, very popular voices, many of them extremely intelligent, articulate, and sometimes just quite funny, who essentially argue that that's all an illusion, that we need to outgrow that sort of thing, that we are simply a complex arrangement of neurons and synapses firing like we do, and that when we're dead, the lights are turned off and the show is over. But the problem is this denial with anything more going on here leaves many people cold, bored, and uninspired. Just can't do it. And so we go looking for explanations for this reverence, and the word that often gets pulled into the conversation is God, but a lot of times the God that we go looking for is a bit like Oldsmobile. It's like they shut the factory down and they don't make them anymore. It's like Oldsmobile was for then, not now. How many of you have ever bumped into an explanation about God that felt to you like you just want to say, wait, it's 2013. Do I actually have to do all that? Like, do I take the whole package? Because do I have to oppress women and deny science? Do I have to? Really? And so I wrote this book because I have a sense there's a growing number of us, so we need some new ways of talking about this reverence humming within us, and God is the word. You can try to use like a different word, but here's what happens. People go, so you're like talking about God. When I first started the church when I was 28, I got into this whole church is so loaded with baggage. We're going to use different words. We're a community of faith, man. We're just a team of disciples. We're just a gathering of the faithful. And people would be like, you mean church? Right? And then I got on this whole kick where I was like, the word Christian, we need to leave that word Christian. It's so loaded down with all sorts of nonsense. And people are that word has so much just garbage attached to it. So we just need to, man, we're disciples. So it's always about, we're disciples, man. We're students. We're followers. Are you a Christian? Well, what do you mean? Because I'm an actual follower. I'm trying to do it, man. I'm a disciple. People be like, well, so you're like a Christian? And you're like, And then somebody said, actually, what's really interesting is if you insist on using the word and you insist on embracing the word with such power and passion and conviction that you force people to readjust their definitions. Get friends like that, by the way, because things go to a whole new place. And so the God is the word we use for that. And when you talk about God, it drags up all sorts of things. So I just want to explore a couple ideas when it comes to God, because often when you talk about God, the first question is, well, what kind of world are we living in? Which, interestingly enough, was a question the Greeks had roughly 2,500 years ago. Greek philosophers had this idea there must be something that is the basic building block of the universe. And if you could identify that thing, that cosmic Lego, that's my term for it, if you could identify that smallest thing upon which everything else is merely a variation of that smallest thing added together, well, then you could explain everything. You could explain why we're here and how we got here and where we're going and all that. And the Greeks had this word temno, which means to divide or to cut. So they said there must be something that you can't divide it anymore. It's the smallest thing. There must be something that's atemno. There must be an atom that is the smallest thing that everything is made of. And so for literally thousands of years, there was all sorts of fascinating speculation about, wow, if we could just find one of these atoms. And then, in the late 1800s, they developed the kind of technology that allowed them to actually, 1897, discover atoms. And what they realized is that atoms are small. They realized that 1 million atoms lined up side by side are about as wide as a human hair. They learned that a grain of sand contains roughly, when you're dealing with hundreds of billions, roughly, you could be off like a billion or so. They realized that a grain of sand contains 22 quintillion atoms, which is 22 with 18 zeros after it. They realized that an atom is in size to a golf ball, as a golf ball is in size to planet Earth. Atoms are small. Thank you very much. I'll be here all week. Now, so the assumption was, well, we have an atom, and so apparently this is essentially the building block that will help explain why everything is the way it is. And obviously, if you could figure out what the thing is that makes everything else in, then you would need no other outside explanation. Are you with me there? But then they discovered, oh, wait. An atom actually has some smaller components. It actually has a center, and it actually has some protons and neutrons and electrons. Actually, you can take apart an atom, and there's some smaller things that make up an atom, smaller than an atom. But then they developed some new technology and realized that those smaller particles, you can actually split them. And then they discovered, actually, those smaller pieces, you can split them. And then they developed some more technology and realized those tiny little pieces, those are actually made of smaller pieces. And so you have bosons, hadrons, mesons, leptons, taus, quarks. You have up and down quarks. You have strange and charmed quarks. You have different tiny little subatomic particles that are actually, turns out, made up of other ones. So for years, there was that whole, what I would refer to as the Truman Show question. How far out does the universe go? Is there a door out there somewhere? But then the haunting question came out, not just how big or far does it go, but how far does it go into its smallness? Can you take the smallest thing, and are there actually smaller things that comprise it? At this point, they have identified roughly 150 subatomic particles, and they're still discovering more. Are you familiar with the Higgs boson? Which sounds like a Southern politician. Didn't his brother John build a farm? And the Higgs boson was essentially, well, there must be this one. Essentially, there's a theoretical frame. There must be a smaller one than that does this particular thing. And then they discovered it, which was like, and then it was like, oh, but that raises all sorts of new questions. And so smaller and smaller and smaller it went. Now, when they got down to the subatomic realm, that's when things got really funky, my scientific term. Because they realized that things don't work like they do in the rest of the world. What they discovered is that subatomic particles, because originally, like from the 50s, there's that atom logo that you've seen before. The idea was, well, there must be a center to the atom, and then all those particles, which are all flying all around the atom and coming and going, those particles must be like little planets orbiting a solar system. And they must be like our solar system, just a very small thing. But then they realized, wait, it doesn't really work that way. What happens at a subatomic level is a particle disappears in one place, and then it appears in another place without traveling the distance in between. Then they realize, wait, actually, a subatomic particle disappears in one space. We don't know why it disappears there, and we don't know why it appears here, and it doesn't travel the distance in between. They begin to realize, wait. What it actually does is it travels every single possible path it could from point A to point B, and it only reveals which path it actually took when you observe it. Some of you are like, put that away. Yeah, actually Niels Bohr, a friend of Einstein's, said, if you study quantum physics and you aren't outraged, then you aren't studying quantum physics. They then discovered, wait. A subatomic particle that has been bonded with another particle, when those two particles are separated, actually communicate with each other and demonstrate an awareness of where the particle is without any communication between the two. So they said, 1949, I think it was Bell's theorem, a particular favorite of mine. They said that if you take an atom and you cut it in half and you put half in New Jersey and half in San Francisco and you change the rotational spin of the half in New Jersey, the half in San Francisco will reverse its spin at the exact same moment. Now, a lot of you have the Apple Rainbow Death Wheel right now. Like when your computer freezes and it's just doing this and you're like, right? Yeah, because this is because you and I were trained in a Western world, and we were deeply influenced by Newton's book Principia, which was essentially an outline of what's called mechanical physics. See, we were taught that there are rules that govern how the universe works. If you and your friends are launching water balloons at that guy on a motorcycle, and you have the proper velocity, weight, and trajectory, you will hit him and make him quite upset. I have a friend who did this in college. You will not have expected that guy to turn his motorcycle and drive across the soccer field towards you, at which point you will soil your drawers as you run as fast as you can in the other direction. Which might explain my grade point in college. We were trained in a particular system that told us there are predictable laws about how the universe works. An object in motion stays in motion unless acted on by an outside force. Flashbacks to 9th grade. But what happened with the quantum revolution is these quantum physicists came along and said, well, actually, it doesn't work that way at the smallest level. The universe is way weirder than any of us thought. We can take probabilities. We can guess where the particle is going to end up. And we can guess with enough certainty to put 1,000 songs in your pocket and to microwave your food and to x-ray your broken bone. So quantum physics has brought us all sorts of unbelievable luxuries and breakthroughs, but also at the basic level, man, the universe is way, way weirder. They also discovered that an atom is 99.9% empty space. And so if you were to take all of the empty space out of all of the atoms in the universe would fit in a sugar cube. I can't say that without laughing. Yeah, and this is science. This is not, J.J. Abrams. This is science. Now, many of us, deeply ingrained in our psyche, mostly through education, was a simple idea that there's a line. And on this side is the physical, material world you and I know to be sweaters and dogs and burritos. I don't know why I use those three examples, but it just felt right. So many of us were taught that there's this line, and there's the physical, hard world that you can test, and you can get evidence, and you can tweak your theories, correct? And then there's this other realm of the unseen, this sort of like, love and spirit and religious sort of whatever. But this world, this is the hard, cold, tangible world that actually exists. But what we've learned from science is the hard, cold floor of tile, wood, polyester, that is actually, at its core, endless frenetic movements of particles coming and going. So you're sitting in a chair. That chair is supporting your weight. You trust that chair to hold you up for the next few moments. If we were to take apart that pew that you're sitting in, it's made of wood, and so I have wood to make a bunch of molecules that are bonded together, and those molecules are made of atoms, and those atoms are essentially patterns and relationships of energy that happen to be bonded as they are right now. But those atoms and those particles will be leaving those atoms and particles and relationships to make other things. And so even you yourself are, in essence, a pattern of energy. That the world, at its core, is energy and the flow of energy in relationship. And then in the middle of it all is you. You, on average, lose 50 to 150 hairs a day. Some of you apparently more than others. You shed somewhere around 10 billion flakes of skin a day, so please vacuum more. You get new skin Your body renews its skin every 28 days, and your body renews its entire self every 9 years. So if I met you 10 years ago, I am today interacting with a different you, even though it's the same you. So the very atoms, molecules, and cells that make you are dying, leaving you, and making up other things like Ohio or Cher or whatever. I don't know what they're making, but they might have made something or they made some you. So that is you. Yeah, imagine if your uncle gave you a boat. And the will was read and you were given a boat. So you went out and you looked at this boat and you put this boat in the water and you're like, this boat needs a new deck. And so you ripped one summer all the planks off the deck of the boat and you put new planks in. But then as you put the planks in, you realize, well, the hardware is kind of bad and I don't know, in like a big wind, I might rip some of the hardware might break. So the next summer, you replace all of the hardware. But then you realize this boat leaks, which makes it no fun. So the next summer, you took all of the boards on the hull of the boat and you tore them off and you replaced them and put new boards. And you realize, I'm going to need some new tar and sealer so it doesn't leak. So if you kept this up, at some point you would have replaced every element of the boat. Yet if you took us all out for a ride, you would say, this is the boat my uncle gave me. Because the boat is in the pattern, not the planks. You are a pattern of planks, moving through space and time with strong opinions about chocolate and Taylor Swift. We cannot locate the you that makes you in your elbow. If we were to take you apart, which different image, how about? If we were to take you apart bone by bone, wait, back up. If we were to analyze your physicality, would we be able to locate in your physicality how you feel about Jim Carrey movies? Or whether you're going to call me maybe? No. So the essence of what makes you is not able to be identified in your physicality. Yes, you have DNA. Your DNA, you share 60% of your DNA roughly with fruit flies, 90% of your DNA with mice, 96% of your DNA with a large ape. You are made of sort of basic elements, nitrogen, oxygen, really basic carbon-based life form that shares much of your essential makeup with lots of other things, and yet there is something about you that you hear a piece of music and your soul soars. You find out that your friend's dad has cancer and your heart becomes as wide as the ocean. And so you are not present in any sense in your physicality, and yet none of us have a problem acknowledging that you actually exist. There is this mystery to what it means to be a human being. I would call it a miracle. It is not something we can prove, and yet we would all agree it exists. So I simply choose to believe that we aren't here by accident, that we aren't random, that somehow all of this matters, and we're connected to each other, and this is all headed somewhere. Now, sometimes people talk about people of faith, which I don't think is a terribly accurate phrase to refer to some people as people of faith. We're all people of faith. Everybody believes something. I choose to believe that you are a sacred, holy, divine gift, mystery, and miracle, and that you matter, and that your story is headed somewhere, and that we, whether we've met or not, are all at some level deeply connected to each other. I believe this because I choose to believe a particular understanding of who God is and what God is up to. So real quickly, 3 central ideas about who God is. Number 1, I believe God is with us. I believe God is for us. And I actually believe God is ahead of us. Now, God with us. For many people in the modern world, the conception they have of God is somewhere else, apparently riding on a cloud, electrically operated, of course, with a long beard robe, and he's quite cranky until Jesus comes, and then he gets happy, at least for a little bit, towards certain people, but ultimately wants to make sure you don't get left behind. be a great idea for a series of crappy novels. Anyway, now, and so what happens then, the God who's somewhere else, is then what you end up with is endless series of discussions about, and then this God, for some reason, comes here from time to time. People even say, man, and then God showed up. To which I always respond, because I have enough cynicism to be, American. Where was God until then? And it would have been lovely if God would have shown up at the Holocaust. And so essentially, this view, if this is your only conception of God is somewhere else, and if we pray enough, or if we're good enough, or if we just repeat the chorus of that worship song for the 17th time in a row, this time without the drums. Leather wristband, here. Seriously, that's fun right there, isn't it? You look like I just did something really naughty. She's literally in the front row going, it's okay, they're not here. Or, and this is fine, but think about the come here, God please be with us. Apparently God is somewhere else and we need to get God here. Which raises 1,000 questions because, once again, if this is your only conception of God, if this is the case then, this world apparently can go on whether that God is real or not. And so you end up having to prove that that God even exists. Now the ancient Hebrews had this word ruah. This word ruah that they had was a word they spoke of that spoke of the energy and electricity that surges through all things. Why do flowers grow up through the concrete? Why does the sun rise and set? Why do waves come in the way that they do? Why do certain pieces of music just fill us with explosive life? Why do certain people, the way they tell a joke, we laugh so hard and we realize that in some strange way when this person enters the room, it's a celebration of life. You have those people, right? When they show up, it's like, okay, this is going to be fun. This is going to be good. This person gives me life. This person is so unbelievably affirming. This person, when they speak or when they take us on those adventures that they cook up, I don't even know where they come up with this stuff. It's just, Now, the ancient Hebrews had this word, ruah. And ruah spoke of that energy that pulses through all things. Ruah was the source of it. Essentially like the universe is plugged into a socket, and ruah is the energy. Now, this word ruah is often translated in the Hebrew scriptures spirit. But for many of us, spirit refers to the stuff that's sort of esoteric, ephemeral, sort of not physical, real. But for them, ruah was this life in all of its fullness. The psalmist, group of prayers in the middle of the Bible, the Psalms, the writer says, where can I go from your ruah? Where can I go from life itself? It surrounds me everywhere I go. I go up here, I go down here, I make my bed here, I soar here. Your spirit. So they believe that God and the presence of God, that God is present here, now, among us, upon us. That when we talk not about a world that keeps going on, and then maybe there's a God who exists somewhere else who comes here from time to time, they talked about the God who is the source of the going-on-ness of everything, if that's a phrase I can use. But I just used it, so it's good. It's legit. We'll go with it. The going-on-ness of things. So when your friend who says, man, I am an atheist and I do not believe in God, but this is wrong that 800 million people don't have access to clean drinking water. What is the impulse within them that says that is wrong and somebody should do something about that? Where does it come from other than the divine ruah, which speaks and is present in all people, places, and things? In the poem that begins the Bible does not begin with a scientific textbook. It begins with a poem. And it's a soaring, lyrical, beautiful poem about how we all are created in the image of this God. I believe you are experiencing God in all sorts of ways every day. Like Jacob, in the book of Genesis, there's this fascinating story where he falls asleep by the side of the road using a rock as a pillow. Some technology is good. And he wakes up and he says, surely God was in this place, and I I wasn't aware of it. He speaks of the divine presence, the Ruach, that surrounds us, that sustains us, that is the singular source of life itself. It comes from somewhere. It flows from somebody. It is a gift we have received and has been given to us from God. So I believe God is with us. And then I believe God is for us. God is for human flourishing. Sometimes God is not only somewhere else, but God is conceived wherever God is, it's not here, and however God is quite cranky. And so human flourishing becomes something other than God's highest desires for us. Now, I don't mean that in a sort of like God has a Ferrari and wants you to drive it. These sort of images aren't helpful. When I'm speaking of the God who is for us, I'm speaking of the God who we meet in the full spectrum of human experience. When I started out as a pastor, my first job, I was 24. And after one of my first sermons, this man named George came up to me. He was in his 60s. And I'll never forget, he comes up and he says, "Hi, Rob, I'm George, and I think you should go to AA." And I was like, I'm not aware that I have a problem with alcohol. And he says, it doesn't matter. You need to go to AA, because everything you need to learn about being a pastor, you're going to learn in AA. And he said, when they come to you, just say, "Hi, I'm Rob, and I pass." So I started going to AA meetings. And I'd sit on the uncomfortable plastic folding chair, and I'd smell the bad coffee, and they'd go around the room. And when they'd get to me, I would say, "Hi, I'm Rob, and I pass." And I know the leader, after a couple of weeks, was like, "Man, this guy's bad shape." You know, he just comes here, he's just not ready. He's not ready. It's okay. We're not already ready at first. But I was trying to figure out what it was, because the first meeting, I had never experienced anything like it. The air was like electric in some way I'd never experienced. And I was trying, you know that feeling when you're experiencing something and you're desperately trying to find the language for it? Like, what is this? What is this? And all of a sudden I realized, this is a bullshit-free zone. Here's why. Everybody in this room has stopped pretending. You're only at an AA meeting if you're done pretending that everything's fine. All you drag into an AA meeting is your primal materiality. You bring who you actually are. Because if you bring any pretense, any pretending, no, seriously, I'm fine. If anything is airbrushed, they will Banksy it out of you so fast. AA is what happens when you come in your raw, broken, flawed, ugly, messy, face flat in the gutter essence. And what I discovered is that it was as powerful, or I might argue more powerful than any church service I'd ever been to, that God was there in some profound way. Now see, for many people, the deal with God is you get things together and God goes, "Well done. Nice. Come on in." But Jesus came along and Jesus offered something called gospel. He announced something called gospel. And gospel is fundamentally counterintuitive. And when I say counterintuitive, what I mean is Jesus said, "Blessed are the poor in spirit." Well, the poor in spirit, the great writer Dallas Willard talks about the zeros, the pathetic, the lame, the nobodies. Blessed are the people who are the zeros, the pathetics, the nobodies. Now, blessed, some people say, is the ancient word. They believe the best way to translate it is God is on your side. Now, here's how you and I understand things. Oh, yeah. I mean, like, blessed are all the humble people who know how much they need God. But actually, knowing how much you need God is a favorable state, correct? And if that's the case, blessed are all the people who are humble. I've just been given the gift of humility, and it's just been lovely. If it's blessed are all the people who are humble, well, humble's a good thing. And you and I know how that works. All the disciplined people, all the people who actually eat green vegetables every meal, all the people who wake up early, all the people who get up and they've been praying before the sun comes up. Seriously. All the people who work hard and take extra AP classes, we get how the world works. The disciplined, righteous, smart people who do all the extra work, they're the ones who get ahead. They earn it, they deserve it, that's how it works, and the rest of us sort of go, I wish I had that. When Jesus comes along, he speaks of gospel. Gospel is fundamentally counterintuitive. What he says essentially is, God, blessed are the zeros, the nobodies, the pathetics, the lame. God is on your side in exactly the moment in which you are most acutely aware of how much you don't have it all together. This God does not wait. This God announces this blessing and favor of this God in exactly your place of most having it not togetherness. This God meets you there. And I discovered at a very early age in an AA meeting that God was upstairs in the sanctuary, but man, God was on fire in the basement with the bad coffee. Because there, in the moment of absolute pathetic, my life is unmanageable and I have lost all power, I found the God who is for us. See, many people have a very binary understanding of God. God is good, which raises all sorts of questions about, well, then what do we do about the bad? But Jesus comes along and Jesus shows us a divine who is in the good, but a divine who also hangs on a cross, which is about as bad as it gets, correct? Jesus shows us a God who's present in the absence. It's one thing for God to be present in the presence. It's another thing to find God in the absence. See, for many of us, we are so attuned to, well, God's all the good stuff, and I don't quite know what to do with all of this giant, steaming hot stack of rubbish, of mistakes and sins and fears and addictions and secrets. And so we live with this giant shadow we carry around. And shadow can be very powerful if you're running a religious institution and you don't want to deal with it because you simply name the enemy over there, and it's fantastic for fundraising. Here's who's wrong. But oftentimes it's simply an exercise in shadow management. We are so terrified of that which lurks within ourselves that we project it onto others, because as long as we're talking about how wrong, liberal, heretical, or misguided they are, we don't have to talk about our own deepest fears, worries, secrets, and anxieties. Are you with me? But here's what happens. When you go into those places, when you go into the deepest, darkest, most terrifying thing that might be true about you, you find that God has been there the whole time. Because God is with us, I believe, and I choose to believe that God is for us. One more thought. I believe God is ahead of us. A couple years ago, I did an event with, they called and they said, here's what we'd like to do. We'd like to put you and the Dalai Lama and Bishop Tutu and Roshi Joan Halifax, who's the leading Buddhist nun in the country, and Ingrid Marston, the leading Islamic scholar. We'd like to put you on a stage and then people can ask any questions they want. And I was like, oh, I'm there. So I go to Seattle, and they say, before the big main event in this sort of arena, the basketball arena at the University of Washington, they said, we want to do an early morning breakfast, and Dalai Lama and Bishop Tutu are going to sit on just 2 chairs and have a conversation, and a couple of us are going to sit around, and we're just going to listen in. And so I'm standing right here, and Dalai Lama comes in the room from this place, and Bishop Tutu comes in from this place, and they meet. And by the way, do you know what they do when they meet? They've been friends for a long time. When Dalai Lama and Bishop Tutu meet, they hug, and then they start tickling each other and giggling. Who knew? Who knew? And so I'm standing here, Dalai Lama's standing here, and Bishop Tutu standing here, and they're hugging and tickling each other and giggling. By the way, what exactly is protocol in that situation? Like, oh, come on, you guys. Actually, you know what I did? I mean, it's like right there. You know what I did? I was like, man, forget it. I pulled out my camera and I just... It was amazing. At one point, so people are asking Dalai Lama questions. At one point, he gets a question. And he pauses. He looks up, he pauses some more. He takes forever, and he goes, I don't know. At one point, he looks over at Bishop Tutu and he says, "You gained weight?" So beautiful and inspiring in some way. It was amazing. It's absolutely, I can't even explain what it was like. And I'm sitting there, and there are people, the gathering was a Seeds of Compassion event, and it was people from every religion, from religions I didn't know were religions. There were no Jedis, but it was like that sort of like, wow, from all across the spectrum, and it was so powerful. And all these people had gathered because the theme was promoting compassion and peacemaking in younger generations. And you're in this room, and people have come from the four corners of the earth to talk about how to make the world more peaceful. And a guy leans over to me and he says, "Hey, do you know there are protesters out front?" I'm like, who protests? That's like being against puppies or something. Like, who protests? And he said, "It's a bunch of Christians." I believe God is ahead of us, pulling us, all of us, into greater peace, justice, compassion, love of enemy. And I believe this divine pull has been acting across human history, pulling all of us, wherever we're at, whatever place and time and country and nation and perspective we come from. I believe God has always been calling all of us into a better future. And you can resist that pull. Our sins and stagnations and fears and secrets, you can resist that as an individual, as a tribe, as a church, as a group. You can, in the name of God, be outside on the sidewalk, missing out on the pull that's happening inside. Now, immediately when you start talking about the God that's ahead, there's always somebody who's like, "Well, I was in a hotel room and I read the Old Testament by Gideon." I mean the Gideon's Bible, Old Testament. And then I go, "What about that Old Testament?" Well, here's an example. There's a phrase we often use here in culture about something that's primitive and barbaric. People will say, "It's that whole Old Testament eye for an eye thing." Now, here's what's interesting. It comes from the book of Exodus, eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth. At that time, if somebody injured your donkey, you could go after them and you could injure their donkey, you could take out their cow, you could kill their horse, you could do all kinds of things to them. And so an eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth was given. It was actually given so that if you injure my donkey, you owe me a healthy donkey. The punishment must fit the crime. So I'm not allowed to go on a donkey killing rampage. You simply owe me however you wronged me. In Latin, it's called lex talionis. It's essentially the model for it's the structure for our modern justice system. Eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth was a giant click forward towards more peace, civility, and justice in that day. So when people talk about that primitive, barbaric eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth, when that command was given, it was actually a step forward. So the Bible was, if you begin to look at how the world was at that time, those were actually phenomenally progressive, radical ideas. The story of Jonah, which often becomes a debate about whether or not dudes get swallowed by fish. Now, the Assyrians were major persecutors of the Israelites. They made the Jewish life like a living hell. They were this massive superpower, and they crushed the Hebrews and just made them miserable. Year after year after year, tormented them. And then this story comes of a God who says to this man, Jonah, "I want you to go to Nineveh, parentheses, Assyria, and I want to show them my redeeming love. I want you to go to the Taliban and show them what my radical, forgiving love looks like." You know what that story's about? That story's about what are we going to do about the people who have wronged us and made our lives miserable? Are we going to hope and pray that God gives them what they deserve? Or are we going to allow God to use us to show them what the redeeming, forgiving, upside-down, mysterious, revolutionary love of God looks like? Are you with me? That's actually a radical step forward. The God who's with us, present, right here, right now, who's for you, who desires your flourishing and thriving, who's ahead of each of us, pulling us into a better and better and better future, one greater than we could ever imagine. One story, and then maybe we'll chat. 3 weeks ago, I was with my friend Carlton, and we were working in his office, second floor of an office building on Ventura Boulevard in Studio City. And we're sitting up there, and we're sitting at his desk. We're actually looking at something on a computer monitor. And all of a sudden, you know that thing when you see something out of your eye, and by the time you've turned, you see sort of the outline of it. But I saw something, and I turned, and I watched a girl on a bike get hit by a car. It happened like that. Like, what is that? Whoa, whoa. But she had gotten knocked down, and so I had, like, sitting there, I was like, I think I just saw a girl get hit by a car. So I get out of my seat, and I walk around the desk, and the wall was all glass. I go over to the wall, and I'm like walking along the wall trying to see, because there's a pickup in the way, and I eventually get down here, and he's like, what are you talking about? What are you talking about? I was like, look at it, look at. And then I get to the point where I can see, and I see there's a girl laying in the intersection. There's a body in the intersection. So I run out of his office and through the sort of lobby area where people are sitting, and it was like literally like a slow motion, like, call 911, even though I have a phone on me. I don't know. At that point, I run out of the office, across the parking structure, and then down the short little street, and this little tiny street ends at Ventura Boulevard. And I get there, and there's a yellow exterminator truck that's at a stop sign, and it was about to turn right onto Ventura, and a car was coming off of Ventura onto the side street, I guess, making a left turn, and didn't see this girl crossing on a bike, and it hit the girl and knocked her across the street, and she landed with her head about, I'd say, 6 or 8 inches in front of the front tire of this pickup truck. And the guy in the exterminator truck is moving the bike out of the street, and she's just laying there. So I get down on the concrete, and I get up to her, and this is what she is. She can barely breathe, so she's sort of, but what she's saying in between gasps is she's repeating, will somebody please tell me that I'm going to be all right? Will somebody please tell me that I'm going to be all right? Will somebody please tell me that I'm going to be all right? Will somebody please tell me that I'm going to be all right? So I just placed my hand on her shoulder, and I just said, there's a bunch of us here. You're going to be all right, okay? Now I want you to grab my hand, and I want you to just take a deep breath. Take a little deeper breath than you just took. Okay, good, good, good. Now, just try to take an even deeper breath. Okay, now can you take an even deeper breath? I said, now, do you feel any pain? She says, yes, I feel my leg. And I look down, and her leg is like flat on the pavement. It's one of those like, wow, I wish I hadn't seen that. And so I say to her, okay, why don't you take my hand? And here's what I want you to do. When you feel the pain, just grab my hand even tighter. Just grab it as tight as you can whenever you feel the pain. Now, show me you can squeeze it. So she squeezes it. And she says, I say, okay, now keep breathing. Stay with, you're going to be okay. You're going to be all right. Okay, now breathe deep. Now squeeze my hand as hard as you can whenever you feel the pain. And she starts squeezing it. And so we're just doing this. You're going to be okay. Just breathe. Just breathe. Okay, next one, try a little deeper breath. And she says, will you please call my boyfriend and tell him that I got hit by a car? I said, well, okay, where's your phone? And she says, it's in my pocket. So I take her phone out of her back pocket, which is legal, I guess, in that situation. And I say, okay, is he in your favorite? She's like, no, in contacts. And she gives me his name, and so I flip through and I find him, and I call him, and I just say, hi, my name's Rob. Susanna, your girlfriend, has just been hit by a car. She's going to be okay. And I start telling him, and he's, all of a sudden, like, I'm like 12 seconds into my thing, and all of a sudden he realizes, when I think about it later, he realizes he's not being punked. He's like, oh my word, what? And so I like, okay, so we'd like to come 4400 Ventura Boulevard. We'll wait here. She'd like you to come as fast as you can, et cetera, et cetera. And then I put the phone back in her backpack, and she was going to be okay. Later, when I realized that she was going to be okay, and they came, and eventually the people came. Partway through, I'm like, I wonder where did Carlton go? And I look up, Carlton is in the intersection directing traffic. Director, directing traffic. Later, I thought about it when they put this huge cast, and within like 7 or 10 minutes, everybody in a red truck was there, and it was amazing. So the pros took over, and later I thought about it, like, now that I know she's going to be okay, Like, I totally thought it would be brilliant to, like, call the boyfriend and be like, okay, here's the deal. Your girlfriend just got hit by a car, but that's not your real problem, dude. Your real problem, you're not in her favorites. So dude, she's going to be fine, but I don't know about you, man. So we're down there, we're sort of in the pavement, we're sort of on the pavement, and I'm holding her hand, and her hair is sort of splayed out on the concrete and just breathing. And the guy who hit her gets out of his car. He's pulled over. And he comes over and he says to Carlton, is she going to be okay? Is she okay? And Carlton says, no. She's not okay, obviously. And the guy says, guy who hit her, probably 70, he says, I was just coming home from cancer treatment. Is that our world or what? Now, here's what happened to me. I don't know her. I don't know the other woman who came and got down on her knees. I don't know the exterminator truck guy who is coming home from cancer treatment. Carlton's directing traffic. We got sirens in the background. But here's what it was like. It was really, really holy. Like, things became very still. Became very quiet, actually. There was this inexplicable sense that we were on holy ground, and that she matters, that he matters, we matter, and this is a gift. And this gift can be taken from you at any moment. See, for many people in our world, especially religious people, and especially religious people in the South, I just added that last part. God, and when you talk about God, generally veers into you have to do or believe or say the right stuff, or it's going to get ugly. And so God becomes who's right, who's wrong, who's in, who's out, who's with us, who's not. And I think we are at a moment where that has taken us down a bunch of roads that don't help and don't bring life, and actually have made the world at times a much worse place. Jesus, I think that what's happening, it's one thing to have the furniture in your brain arranged properly, which is nice and helpful and very life-giving and important and crucial. But it's another thing to see. There are people who can quote Bible verses all day long, and yet they do not see that which has been right in front of them the whole time. And I guarantee the people who you most respect, who you most want to be like, are people, they see. And when you're with them, something about their presence, you slow down. Something about the way he or she cooks a meal, it slows you down and you find yourself reminded of certain things. They see that which is right here, right now. It's one thing to be right. It's another thing to be a holy woman who finds God in all sorts of everyday, routine, mundane tasks. I met a man the other day. I was introduced to him by a friend. Someone was out in the street thing, and you meet somebody who knows somebody. And I asked the guy what he does, and he cleans houses for a living. He's wearing a crisp white polo shirt. I said, really? He says, yes, I clean houses. I said, well, tell me about that. And he says, I am invited into people's homes to help make their home more clean and orderly, and I consider it a high honor. And I said, wow, they must be fortunate to have somebody who cleans their house with that sense of sort of importance. And he says, oh, no, I'm the one who's blessed that people will invite me in and let me try and help them have a better life and a more organized, clean home. And I'm listening to a man who cleans houses for who knows how many dollars an hour, and I realize I'm in the presence of somebody who sees. And he turns cleaning houses into something more beautiful than an orchestra or a sunset. This is our invitation. This is our invitation. Our invitation is to see the God who's with us right here, right now, who is for us, and who is ahead of us, calling me and you and you and you and you and you into a future better than we could ever imagine. And that, my brothers and sisters, is what I'm talking about when I talk about God. Yeah? So we have time for a couple questions? Okay, anybody have a question? Just stand up and shout it out, because if we give you a microphone, you might go on forever. If you stand up, you'll keep it short. Anybody? Yes, hi.
I was wondering.
I'll repeat it maybe.
I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit what it was like to meet with area pastors earlier today.
What was it like to meet with area pastors today in Nashville? It was great. And what's interesting to me is when you meet with pastors, they always want to talk about the same things, the same exact things. Pastors need to be reminded that sometimes what happens is a pastor ends up taking a paycheck to be a punching bag for the congregation. So it's important that pastors have boundaries and don't have 17 email exchanges with somebody about their interpretation of Revelation 15, because it's a drain. A pastor is actually a sacred resource. And pastors have to have voices that say to them, listen, there are certain ridiculous conversations you don't have to have. You know what I mean? Like lots of pastors spend an extraordinary amount of their energy dealing with complete nonsense. And it actually helps people stay a little bit crazy. Instead of saying, this is how we behave here, this is how we honor each other, and this is how we're going to do it. But pastors are fascinating. Like even today, they have questions about how do we tell the best story? How do we tell this Jesus story in the new world we find ourselves in with passion and conviction in new and fresh ways? I always want to talk to them about Sabbath. I often ask them what days of the week they don't respond to emails. Because there's this sort of weird warped thing. The devil doesn't take a vacation, so we don't either. And in our culture, at least when I was growing up, a pastor's kid sometimes meant, oh, you mean screwed up. So I often talk to them about giving your family and your kids your best energies instead of giving your family and your kids the table scraps that are left over. You know what I mean? Once you've given them to the church. My kids couldn't care less how many books I sell. Are you going to be home to skate or not? Are we going surfing Sunday or not? So generally those are the kinds of things we talk about. But I met all sorts of fascinating people. People are very interesting, by the way. By the way, people who are interesting are always the same people who find the world interesting. Are you with me there? Like if you find the world interesting and you find people interesting and you meet with people, and when you meet with somebody who you ask them what they do and they tell you something and you have no idea what they're talking about, that can either end the discussion or it can start it. But my experience has been people have absolutely fascinating stories to tell, and many people don't get asked on a regular basis, tell me more about that. Tell me more about that. I met a guy who's an insurance adjuster recently. Whew, get that party started. And so I was like, wow, that's a man. Okay, so how do you adjust insurance? And he said, actually, people call me when something breaks or collapses or falls apart, which we all know what a hassle that is, correct? And here's what he's been trying to figure out. How can I best help people when they call me with a claim? And he's realized that some people just need to hear, listen, before we get to the claim, I want you to know I can only imagine what a hassle this has been. And it's like people just go, you know what I mean? It's like releasing a valve. And then everything so to me, that's the really compelling thing, is what does it look like to find the depth and the kavod in everyday life, which is what's one of the things pastors do, is help people find the kavod in the everyday. That's a good question. Yeah. Yes, hi, what's your name?
I'm BJ. Well, that's one of my many nicknames.
BJ, that's one of my many nicknames. Okay, thank you for that added detail. That was kind of irrelevant, but interesting. Okay, great.
I have a long name anyway. What I was going to ask you is I'd like the analogy you use about your attendance at the AA meeting and how it was essentially a bullshit-free zone. And the reason I have is I come from ministry not too dissimilar from yours, but my question is that what do you think you yourself or what we could do, either individually or the people that we know, to create that non-bullshit zone for people to be open?
I love it. Like, I use that phrase, that sort of no BS zone, sort of like my own thing, and you're like, what can we do to create a no, like you're gonna, like I'm gonna see like a pamphlet with like 4 points and a 12. That's funny. You spoke of it like it's a legitimate idea, like it's like scholars have been talking about this for a while, and I've just sort of, you know what I mean? That was great. That's the secret to public speaking. Just say it with authority, and people will be like, oh, okay. You know what I mean? Okay, here's the deal. The stories that we tell shape us. So if I visit your church, and I hear stories about real people who are finding healing, marriages in which there's been infidelity, and they somehow manage to work through it. The stories that you all tell will send me messages. I'll pick it up. I actually think that you have your brain, you have the way in which you analyze things and pick them apart and the filter that you run things through, but then there's what's called subcortical awareness, which is all the radar in your body. So how come a lot of women know when they're not safe? My wife knows when she's not safe, and she can't tell you how. You know when somebody's lying, correct? You know when this person who's talking, you know when they're actually talking about something they've experienced. I've always said the whole church knows how the pastor's marriage is, even if they never talk about it. We just pick all this stuff. It's like your body. One of the things I talk about in the book is your body is a highly, highly tuned radar system. Actually, this is the power of YouTube, is your brain. For so many people, the brain is the dominant filter through which they decide what's true or not. And then Bono comes along and goes, oh, and everybody goes, oh, and somehow, like, what do those lyrics mean? I have no idea, but it was real and true and awesome, man. Why? One of the powers of what Bono does is he speaks to the rest of your being. And some things you know and you can't explain how you know them, but you still know they're true, correct? Some things are true at a heart level. So how do you create a kind of church like that? People tell, you have people tell the kinds of stories where after a while we begin to realize, wow, this is a place where you can be who you are. And we just pick that up in 1,000 ways. We pick up whether this gospel is an announcement of what we have to do to get in with God, or an announcement of who we truly are. Like the Apostle Paul says at one point, let us live up to what we've already attained. What? You realize what's happening there is he's saying the gospel is an announcement of who you actually are. And you are invited to live into your true self, which is very different from Christians don't read their Bible and Christians don't evangelize and Christians that's shame and guilt and manipulation. That's trying to get you to do things or else God will come bring the heat, which is very different than announcement. Which are you more motivated by? Or let's put it in parental terms. When I'm with my kids, there are 2 ways to parent my kids. One is when they do something completely squirrely or nuts. Or in our case, right now with the 12 and 14-year-old boys, showering regularly is somewhat crucial. It's unbelievable. Like, there are 2 ways for me to parent. When they do something, how come you're always doing that? Or, hey, you're a bell. We don't roll like that. How come you're always doing that? Do you know what that is? That is a statement of identity. How come this is who you are? Why are you this person? Which is very different from, this is who you are, and I want you to remind you who you are. I guarantee the people who have most spoken to you and inspired you and shaped you were people who announced to you who they believe you are. And it awakened something. Those words created a new world. Maybe I could be a teacher, a scientist, or whatever. Right? Anybody know what I'm talking about? Interesting, by the way, when the ancient Hebrews talked about how God creates new world, what is the method by which God creates? Speaks. Words create new worlds. You hear something spoken about you, and something bursts forth in you like, that's who you see me? I never saw myself like that. Maybe I am. How many of you have had something affirmed about your gifting and talents that you hadn't even thought of, and when enough people named it, you began to actually see it in some way, and it actually shapes sometimes the course of our whole lives. So quick, number one, the kinds of stories that you tell. Over time, you pick up what the stories are like, and then is this a word about who we actually are, or is this one more sort of guilt, condemnation, why aren't you, which doesn't really actually shape us? You can sure get a big crowd with that sort of thing, because you can sort of slap people around and they go, you can build whole giant ministries with lots of podcasts by just telling people how nasty they are and how much God hates them. And people get sort of, oh yeah, right, tell it like it is, doesn't care what people think. But it doesn't actually shape your heart into an actual kind of person. You're doing it for other reasons. That's my best with that one, my good man. Yes?
If I, this song? Okay. If I could, I'd like just to make a quick comment and segue into a question.
Yes. There are no such things as quick comments, but anyway, go on.
Very true. I was given Love Wins by a minister. And
yes.
At the time, he said, please do not tell anyone I gave you this because I may lose my job. And
okay, wait. This minister gave you porn? Or a book about God's love?
This is where it gets really cool, though.
A pastor gave you one of my books and says, don't tell anybody I gave this to you because I might get fired from my job.
Exactly.
That's
because
inspiring.
I spent 10 years.
Literally, by the way, there's a shop in England. I was doing a Q&A in England at Central Hall, which is across the street from where Will and Kate were married. And it's like it's just packed to the rafters. And I do this open Q&A with 2,000 people. And the Brits, when they ask questions, they ask really long questions, but their accents are so great and they're so intelligent. As a friend of mine says, the English still enjoy language. And this one guy tells this story about going to buy my book somewhere, and they don't have it anywhere in the store, and he can't find it. And he goes up to the front to ask about where he can find it, and the cashier goes behind on the shelf, and my books are in brown paper bags. I love it. I'll have Velvet Elvis and some Jack Daniels. So great. I love it. Okay, so anyway.
Well, I'm a preacher's son, Church of Christ. My father wasn't the radical, you're going to hell if you're not Church of Christ. But in the 4th grade, the elder did tell me that my grandfather was going to hell because he did not attend church, because he did not confess that, quote unquote, Jesus was the Son of God in a certain ceremony. And from there, I spent 10 years putting heroin in my arm, and spent 10 years going to rehabs and spending all of my parents' money and seeing hell in people's lives. And I got to a point to where when Love Wins came out, it articulated, Rob, every question that I had and affirmed it. And it gave me the courage to be able to say, I'm not the only one who's thinking this. And it led me to start my own spiritual base to rehab, in which it's a choice, okay? I'm getting out of the way, and God's going to do the work here, and we're going to expand this.
Awesome.
Stars aren't here just for looks. They serve a purpose. We're all connected. Here's Love Wins. Read this, okay? And you just tell me what you think, because it's nothing but questions. Forget what you've heard. And I guess my question to you is I've evolved spiritually over the last 7 years. I found myself becoming what I hated about the church. I'm judging them because they won't change and open their minds, and now I'm becoming bitter, and I'm like, well, hold on a second. That's what I despise about them. So how do I raise my family in a church where my wife needs community? She needs to be surrounded by people on Wednesdays and on Sundays, where I get my meat, I get my Jesus time with people every single day. I get church with me and my best friend doing life together.
Right.
I don't have to have that structured time, but it doesn't meet her needs. But
Okay.
for me,
So the question's about your wife?
no, how do you raise a family when,
Your family.
when you're hearing a preacher talk, okay, universalism and this and that, you're going to hell if you don't do this, this, and this. I don't believe that.
Then why are you there?
Well, because it creates a huge conflict because me and my wife are on two spiritual different levels.
Okay.
And I don't need to be there, but I'm not being the spiritual leader of my family if I'm not
Okay.
suiting up and showing up.
You're a preacher's son?
Yes.
No way.
Yeah.
Okay.
Imagine that.
Okay. Okay.
And by the way, if you want to mentor somebody, I'm ready to rock and roll, dude. I will pack my stuff up, get on the bus, and let's go rock and roll.
Okay, what's your name?
Brian Perkins.
Brian.
Yeah.
Brian Perkins. There's like 1,000 things in your question? Yeah. You may need, if it serves your wife well, you may for a season need to go and just bring something to read. You railing against the church isn't interesting. It's not compelling. You have work to do in the world, helping people get clean from heroin, cocaine, drugs, alcohol, etc. You have work to do, and you need to do this work. Are we dialed in on that? So here's the deal. There will be a million ways to be distracted from the work that you have to do. I have a friend who's been criticized a fair bit. And you could spend all your time sort of, it has nothing to do with the work I have to do. I want to take care of my family. I have a 3-year-old daughter. I want to spend time with my daughter, my wife, and kids, and we have these great friends, and we have these long meals with lots of wine, and we grill out, and we live near the ocean, so we all go surfing, and then we have fish tacos, and it's a beautiful life, and I love it. And then I have books I got to write, and then I got to come to Nashville, and so I got stuff I got to do. So I can spend all my time wondering and getting angry with the people who don't like what I do, but it's absolutely irrelevant. I don't Google my name. I don't go looking for blog fights because it's boring and irrelevant. I met a couple 4 days ago in their late 20s, early 30s, and they came up to me, and the wife said, "I just found out that I have stage 4 cancer." And as she says this, her husband puts his arm on her, and his eyes are like clouded with tears, and she said, "Would you pray for us?" So this is where we actually live. People who are trying to find God in the midst of stage 4 cancer with a woman in her late 20s. And I was trained as a pastor, so I was trained to try and help people find God and find resurrection from the highest of highs to the lowest of lows and everything in between, including stage 4 cancer. So that's what I'm trying to do. And I got like 4 books in my head, and I got this TV show we're working on, I got this novel, I got some other things I'd like to do, so I try to do that. So for you got to stay absolutely honed in on this. Kierkegaard said that a saint is the person who can will the one thing. Is the person, there's 1,000 things you could be doing. But if you have this calling to work with special needs middle school students, or if you have this calling to make landscapes really beautiful and sustainable, or whatever it is, then you have to go after that, and you have to be laser focused on that. Now, you have a family, and you're trying to sort of shepherd them along, and if that brings your wife life, then you and your wife have to work that one through. The two of you have to work that one through. And you may need to go for a season because it serves her well, and you may need to just suck it up and decide, I am not going to listen. I am somehow not going to listen, or I'm going to check, or I'm going to think about other things, or I'm just going to honor what this person's voice does in her life, but I am not going to just moan about it every Sunday afternoon at lunch. Or, you know what, honey, I'm so glad you're doing that. I am going to go fishing or build a raft, or I don't know what you do in your spare time. Just making stuff up. But like, you just say, you know, why don't you go for a season? And always speak of seasons. Because sometimes what happens is people are like, oh, is it always going to be like this? For a reason, for a season. This is what we're doing right now. This is what's working for us right now. This is what season of life we're in right now. It may last 6 weeks. It may last 6 years. It may last forever. It may last for 2 weeks. So it may involve all sorts of things. But the really interesting thing for you and your wife is to explore, what does this look like for this season? And just say to your wife, here's where I'm at, and I just can't do that for a while. I just can't. And I think if you take the first move and say, I need you to help me out here because this is where I'm at and this isn't bringing me life, you may be surprised at how she responds. But that's the really interesting, compelling thing. But whatever you do, if you become the guy who's angry with fundamentalists, it's not interesting. It's just kind of boring, actually. But you telling us about the latest person who's gotten clean from heroin, now that's interesting. And we'll give you the mic all night for that. Yeah. Yes, hi. Back there with the hand way up. Okay.
My name is Michael.
Hi, Michael.
Oh, there's a mic. Okay. My name is Michael. I'm from Kentucky. I love everything that you've ever written. I found Christ on Easter with Velvet Elvis, so it was awesome.
Wow.
And my question to you, Rob, is, you have been the forefront of this movement and this generation for us young people to find Christ. And you talk about in your book, Velvet Elvis, about repainting the faith, about wrestling with the truths of this ancient text. And my question to you is, what would you recommend for someone like myself or other young students who are aspiring to go into the ministry who want to do that such thing?
Yeah.
So that's my question.
Okay. First off, get a job in a place where you're the only Christian. Whether you're cleaning toilets or it's a bar or it's an accounting firm, I don't know what it is. Get a job where you're around people who have no idea what you're talking about. Because otherwise you may end up talking about a bunch of things that no one cares about. So the goal is you are in honest, authentic friendships with people who you are actually hearing the kinds of things you're interested in, how it actually sounds to everyday real people. Otherwise, you run the risk of veering off into a little subculture that has its own little heroes and songs and books and doesn't really have anything to say to how the world really is. Secondly, I would become a student of culture. So why does People magazine sell millions of copies? There are 3 or 4 arcs to every People magazine story. She's either found love, had her heart broken, losing weight, gaining weight, finding a new love, gaining weight for a baby, having baby, showing baby pictures, how fast can she get the weight? There's only a couple of arcs. Are you with me? And actually, it's in the pop and the trivial that you see where humanity really lives. Does that make sense? And so you want to become a student of what it means to be human. For example, for roughly 10 years, starting in 2001, the U.S. could not find a man in a cave. The greatest military superpower the world has ever seen could not find Osama bin Laden, who was responsible for the death of thousands of innocent Americans, correct? Could not bring this man to justice. During this time, this 10-year stretch, what was the most popular television show that came out of nowhere and they had to expand it into multiple cities? CSI New York, Miami, LA, and what is the plot of every single CSI episode? They find a body, and then what happens for the rest of the show? Highly competent, trained professionals bring the killer to justice. And this show is so popular that they have to have other cities where the same plot unfolds. So the exact moment, like really, I wonder if they're going to find him. What was that like? Looks like this killer struck a little late, or whatever. Okay, so you can quote Bible verses, and that's very powerful and and it can do a really amazing thing. But when you become a student of the human condition and you connect those two and you realize there is a need for justice that is built into who we are as human beings. And if we can't find justice in a particular area in the real world, and that story we can't hear told, we will make up that story to reaffirm it's important to us. Correct? So that you are now becoming a student of how people actually live and how we're wired. And if you can call those things out, now you're onto something. So when you meet people, I would learn to be a student of people and ask them questions and find out all sorts of things. Where do they come from? How do they know? Why are they doing what they're doing? What do they love? What do they hate? Who are they related to? How do they think about family, religion, politics, geography? How do they think about... When you become a student of the world, you begin to actually maybe have something to say to people. And then thirdly, I would find a community, and I would find somebody who's doing what you want to do, and I would beg them to let you follow them around. And I would just say, man, I will take out the trash in order to be around. Maybe wherever you live, there is somebody in the neighborhood who's a pastor who you have, like, I want to do that. And just say to them, could I follow you around on Sundays? And the best thing you can do is just get a front row seat and just watch and observe. And then remember that there's no such thing as failure. That's like 6 things. When in doubt, just go, fourthly, there's no such thing as failure. But yeah, there's a couple of thoughts. Great question. Yes, hi.
First, I want to tell you that the students at the Wesley Foundation in Knoxville at UT really love that you challenge them a whole bunch. And they're like, oh, we're great, you're going.
Awesome.
Secondly, I'm interested in how you came to this point. Like, how do you go from Wheaton and Fuller to LA and Love Wins? How do you, was there someone in your life that saw something different? Was it just life experience? How do you move from what, from the outside, seems like a really closed culture of evangelicalism and that sort of thing to not at all? Like, how does that work?
It's funny you should ask. In my new video series, Your Best Day. Oh, wait, that's taken. Okay, when I was in college, my friends and I were in a band called Ton Bundle, but we put a blank line in front of the ton so people could put their own name. So one gig, we had this picture of us dressed up as nuns with shotguns, and we were Nun Ton Bundle. But I happened to but there was this whole scene that exploded when I was in college. And my roommate started an improv comedy group called Seafood Rodeo, in which they would reenact scenes from BJ and the Bear with folding chairs. And Funk and Herod were musicians that had a bunch of albums out. My college roommate was Ian Eskelin, who's from a band called All Star United. He's now a producer here in Nashville. But it was like we were all like making stuff. And it was like humming with, let's try this, let's try that. Can we actually fit all the furniture from the lobby of the dorm in the elevator? So my experience of, like, in a Christian, my first Christian community I was really a part of was at college, and it was alive, and people were doing art exhibits, and they were doing, this one guy named Charlie Mason was doing like 20-foot wide oil paintings of monsters' eyeballs. And so we convinced him to let us use them to cover the walls of our apartment. And it was all about, there's stuff to make, and let's make some more stuff. So it didn't feel repressive and confined to me. And then one summer I spent 2 months, and I backpacked through Europe on $5 a day, and like slept out under, like when I couldn't find a place. I convinced people to let me sleep in their closets. I slept out on the roof of castles for free on the turret part, because they would let us up there, although they didn't know it. So I was just interested in the world, and so I just tried to explore. So I've always just found things interesting, and always just sort of gone where there's never been a plan. It was always just, what's the next thing we have to try? And I always, at a young age, probably the real answer to your question, at a young age, I had a series of experiences in which I became deeply aware of a resurrected Jesus who was real, and that I was loved, and that I was going to be okay. So I early didn't come in through a catechism or a doctrine or a dogma. I came through this very, very simple childlike God loves you, and Jesus came to show you that love. And in Jesus' world, doesn't matter if you're not the best athlete or the best student, there's some stuff for you to do. So when people talk about your doctrine or your theology or whatever, I didn't come into it through that door. I came into it through a very real experience that life is worth living, and you ought to unfurl your energies in the world. So like some idea of, well, people might not like that, or the institution or the system, or you might, it's always been, to be honest with you, totally irrelevant. It just doesn't, I got stuff that I find interesting, and when I discovered that other people found this interesting, it was like, oh, no. I seriously feel like I've won the lottery. Like the fact that you all will come out here tonight, I don't even have words for it. And the fact that I would they'd give me like a microphone and I'd get to talk and you all would listen. Abraham Joshua Heschel said, I didn't ask for success, I asked for wonder. So I don't like books or New York Times bestseller stuff or all that. That's nice, but I get to make things and then share them with people like you. And you all have, in a very real way, made an amazing life possible for me, and so I get to do that. So I actually think the question behind the question behind the question, suffering raises lots of questions. When you go through something, car wrecks and cancer raises lots of questions, you know, as a pastor. Blessing raises just as many questions, and so does grace. When really good things happen, it can be just as traumatizing. Why do I get to do this? So for a while there, I just couldn't make sense of it. I don't understand why I get this great of a life. And then I decided to stop wondering and just enjoy. So that's really the deal. I have more joy than ever. And your question, those of you who are like, what about the critics? What can you say about me now? Like I'm a heretic? Ooh. Here's the thing about criticism. Here's the thing. If you just keep at it and you just keep doing the thing you need to do, you wake up one day and you realize that you're still here. And whoever has 100,000 Twitter followers and they said whatever, and so-and-so blogged about whatever, and so-and-so is not going to support you anymore, and you're still here. You're still here. And what it does when you realize that, when you realize, wow, you can say that about me? Ooh, that's creative. I had an interview the other day, and they're like, your such and such critic says this. And I was like, you know what that is? That's a Nerf bullet. Seriously. And what it does, it's hard to explain. If you're willing to go all the way into the center of it, and the trick is to keep a thick skin but a soft heart. That's the art of it. But if you do that sort of work, you come out with this lightness, and you come out with this sense of like, man, it's suddenly now starting to get fun. So I have no idea how I got there, and I know I knew where we're headed, but man, it's a good time. Should we do one more? A couple more? Okay, I'm going to wrap it up. Yeah?
The only question that I have, well, I have many, but one is, why can't we continue with these many questions in the next room? Because the people from Barnes & Noble are wanting to know why you're not selling books. And so...
I'm not buying my books. So let me just say a couple things to wrap it up.
Sure.
I'm so glad you came tonight. My experience has been that people want to talk about the things that matter most. And I don't know what sort of stuff you drag through the door about God. But if you're part of a church or a community or a religion, or you consider yourself devoted to something, if it doesn't give you life, if it doesn't free you, if it doesn't open you up, if it doesn't make you more and more aware of the holiness and the sanctity of every moment, then leave it behind and find something that does. Life is short, and it does matter, and you matter, and we all desperately need each other. I can't begin to say to you what it is like for me to come miles from home and have you all show up. I can't even put it into words. So thank you for giving me a great life. Peace be with you. Okay, go. This way?